Good evening, everybody. The Planning Commission meeting of March 29th, 2023 will come to order. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The Secretary will call roll.
Commissioner Mayer. Here. Commissioner Mann. Commissioner Kennedy. Vice Chairperson Rice.
Here.
Chairperson Tolson.
Here. May I have a motion for approval of the agenda?
Move to approve the agenda.
I'll second it.
A motion was made by Vice Chair Rice and a second by Commissioner Mayer. Unless there are any objections, the agenda stands approved. We have 3 sets of minutes to approve. We're going to do these one at a time. May I have a motion for approval of the January 4th minutes?
I move to approve the minutes from January 4th.
Second.
We have a motion was made by Commissioner Mayer with a second by Vice Chair Rice. Unless there are any objections, the minutes are approved for January 4th.
That was for 2023.
2023, yes. So now we're going to have a motion for approval of the January 18th, 2023 minutes.
Move to approve the minutes of January 18th, 2023.
I'll second it.
Thank you very much. A motion was made by Vice Chair Rice with a second by Commissioner Mayer. Unless there are any objections, the minutes are approved. Finally, we need a motion for approval of the March 1st, 2023 minutes.
I move to approve March 1st, 2023 minutes.
I'll second.
Thank you very much. A motion was made by Commissioner Mayer with a second by Vice Chair Rice. Unless there are any objections, the minutes are approved. The Secretary will read the declaration of conflict.
If any member of the Planning Commission may have a conflict of interest or any reason why that member must abstain from consideration of any matter on this agenda, he or she should so declare at this time.
Are there any declarations of conflict? Hearing none, we will move forward. We have public statements. This is the time allotted for public statements or comments on all items other than hearing items. Is there anyone in the chamber wishing to be heard? Okay. Is there any correspondence from the Deputy Director City Planner?
Yes, Chairman Tolson, members of the Planning Commission, I did provide you one supplemental staff report for item 11A2 regarding the cargo container item tonight, and also copies were provided to you here, and they're also out in the lobby for the public.
Thank you very much. This is the time and place set for a public hearing on the consideration of Z-S 2023-003, city-initiated text amendments to amend portions of the Title IX of the Simi Valley Municipal Code regarding accessory dwelling units, and determination that the amendments are exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. Are there any ex parte communications to report? May we have an oral report on this matter by staff?
Yes, Chairman Tolson, members of the Planning Commission, this is another one of our ADU updates in response to legislation passed by the California legislature last year, and also some minor changes to our ADU local standards. Our senior planner, Narn Gunasakara, is here for the presentation. Narn?
Good evening. The California legislature passed AB 2221 and SB 897 in 2022, updating the government code sections related to accessory dwelling units, known as ADUs. This has necessitated an update to the city's ADU ordinance. The new legislation removes front yard setbacks for statewide exemption ADUs, changes height limits for attached and detached ADUs, requires objective design standards be implemented for ADUs, and allows detached ADUs to include a garage. The proposed update includes code changes that reflect the required updates to the mandatory state requirements for ADUs. Where these are addressed, these will be displayed in red text. Also included are city-initiated development standards as allowed by state law to encourage neighborhood consistency. These will be shown in blue text through the presentation. ADUs constructed in conjunction with SB 9 units and lot splits will also be addressed. And lastly, cleanup and clarification items from the last major update in 2020 are also included in the code update but are not directly addressed in the presentation. Before moving on to the code amendments in detail, I want to cover the concept of a statewide exemption ADU as detailed in the government code. This is basically an ADU that is up to 800 square feet in size and 16 feet in height. Though note that the city actually allows an 18-foot height limit, as that is the height limit that we allow for accessory structures throughout the residential zone. State law severely restricts the development standards that can be imposed on these ADUs. These include lot coverage, open space, minimum lot size, among others. This was a part of the last major ADU code update in 2020. State law now does not permit front yard setbacks to be implemented for these ADUs, as shown in the diagram. Rear and side yard setbacks remain at 4 feet. Staff has also added a clarification item to the code that ADUs proposed within hillside performance standard areas, specifically within 20% or more slopes, will be limited to the statewide exemption limit of 800 square feet. As background, Senate Bill 9 became effective in 2022 and allows property owners within single-family zones to develop up to 2 primary residential units on a single lot with ministerial approval, and/or create a 2-lot subdivision known as an urban lot split on an existing residential lot subject to certain criteria being met, again with ministerial approval. 2 primary units may also be constructed on each lot. When ADUs and SB 9 units are combined, the city can limit the total number of residential units on these developments to 4, inclusive of ADUs and junior ADUs. As a reminder, junior ADUs are basically smaller versions of ADUs that are contained entirely within a single-family home. The code update includes details on what combinations will be permitted in such cases. Please note that the SB 9 ordinance will be brought back to the Planning Commission for discussion shortly. Diving into these combinations, we have an existing primary dwelling unit on the left as shown in the diagram. In the middle scenario, this becomes an SB 9 unit with a JADU within the unit, while a second SB 9 unit and a detached ADU has been constructed. In the diagram on the right, an ADU has been substituted for the JADU. In all cases, the city has decided to limit these ADUs to 800 square feet, and they must be detached from the main structure. Note that the second ADU proposed in the diagram on the right would need to be separated from other structures by 10 feet instead of the usual 6 feet. And again, that is a city-initiated standard. When urban lot splits are proposed, the total number of units continue to be limited to 4. In the scenario on the left-hand side, a lot split is proposed on a lot with an existing home, which then becomes an SB 9 unit, and an ADU. An SB 9 unit and an ADU or another SB 9 unit can be built on the new lot. The scenario on the right-hand side is similar except for there being a JADU within the existing home instead of an ADU, and an SB 9 unit on the new lot instead of an ADU. As mentioned before, the total development is limited to 4 units across both lots. There are also urban lot split scenarios. These are also urban lot split scenarios, but in both cases, no new ADUs or JADUs are permitted. On the left-hand side, you see a parcel map that is accompanied by the construction of an SB 9 unit on the original lot and 2 SB 9 units on the new lot, totaling 4 units. On the right, a home with an existing JADU and a detached ADU is split, and new construction is limited to 1 SB 9 unit on the new lot. Again, in all cases, the total number of units is limited to 4. Another change mandated by the state are height limits, and these are primarily for attached ADUs. The city previously limited all ADUs to a single story and 18 feet in height. State law now requires that attached ADUs be allowed up to 25 feet or the maximum height permitted by the underlying zoning, whichever is lower, and for these to be 2 stories. The height limit would be 25 feet in all the city's single family zones, as the maximum height in all these zones is 30 feet. This height limit would apply in all cases where the side and rear yard setbacks are the minimum 4 feet as required by the state. The only exception to this would be if the setbacks for the proposed ADU are increased to 10 feet or more for the side yard setback or 20 feet for the rear yard setback. With these optional increased setbacks, the proposed code update includes an allowance for attached ADUs to be increased to 30 feet in height. These are the same height limits and setback requirements for regular home additions. It is hoped that this would incentivize homeowners to match the underlying single-family zoning requirements in order to obtain the extra 5 feet in height for these ADUs. The city is not proposing to allow 2-story detached ADUs. These continue to be limited to a single-story structure, 18 feet in height. There is a state-required additional 2-foot allowance for ADUs within a half mile of a high-quality transit stop, if required to accommodate a roof pitch that is aligned with the primary dwelling unit's roof pitch, which would allow these detached ADUs to be 20 feet in height. The figure you see illustrates the half-mile radius around the only high-quality transit stop in the city, which is the Metrolink station located at 5050 Los Angeles Avenue. State law also requires that design standards imposed on ADUs be objective, measurable, verifiable, and knowable to all parties prior to project submittal. A planning process based on objective design standards involves no personal or subjective judgment by a public official. Objective design standards were included in the 2020 update. However, the city is proposing some minor changes to these standards. Attached ADUs must continue to match the main home with the colors and materials proposed. For detached ADUs, a minimum of 1 color and 1 material must be included from the primary dwelling. As ADUs are becoming more and more popular, more customizable, prefabricated ADU models, as shown in the photographs, are being produced. This requirement would ensure that such ADUs would be compatible with the main home while providing homeowners in Simi Valley with more flexibility in purchasing or building their ADUs. The city is also proposing standards related to window placement. Windows are not permitted above the first 10 vertical feet of the wall plane for both attached and detached ADUs in order to preserve privacy for neighboring properties. As attached ADUs are now allowed on the second floor, windows facing adjoining properties will not be permitted unless setbacks are increased to 10 feet for side yards and 20 feet for rear yards. An example is shown in the left with the ADU portion highlighted in red, where no windows are allowed within the minimum setbacks on the second floor. Increasing the setbacks would allow windows to be permitted as shown on the right. These setbacks, as before with the height limit, with the 30-foot height limit, are the setbacks required for 2-story additions to single-family residences. This is yet another incentive for homeowners to match the underlying single-family home setbacks to obtain these windows. Non-statewide exemption ADUs. That is, ADUs over 800 square feet in size, and any second ADU proposed in conjunction with an SB 9 unit will be subject to additional city-initiated development standards. One standard is that no structures, inclusive of ADUs and SB 9 units, shall cumulatively cover more than 40% of the first 10 feet of a side yard and the first 20 feet of the rear yard of a lot. Looking at this example, the first 20 feet of the rear yard and the first 10 feet of the side yard are shown in yellow. And the square footage of the red SB 9 unit, the blue portion of the ADU, not the entire ADU, and the green portion of the shed cannot be more than 40% of the total of the yellow areas. Additionally, non-statewide exempt ADUs would also be required to keep at least 50% of the rear yard width open. inclusive of all structures on site. In the above in the example that's shown, the combined width of the shed and the ADU, the green arrows, would need to be 50% or less than the width of the rear yard, depicted in the red arrow. The SB9 unit is outside of the 20-foot rear yard setback and as such would not be counted in this calculation. The purpose, as with the 40% coverage rule, is to reduce crowding on lots and ensure that sufficient private open space will be retained with these proposals. State law also now requires allowing an attached garage to a detached ADU. There is no size limit imposed by state law on these garages. The city's proposed standard limits the garage portion of such a proposal to 400 square feet, which is sufficient for a 2-car garage. Objective design standards have been added for garages in order to ensure that they are the same material and color as the ADU. Applicants also frequently include attached patios with their ADU proposals. The code has been clarified to allow patio covers limited to 10% of the proposed ADU size. The color of the patio cover must be a color that is present on the ADU to maintain architectural compatibility. The proposed changes will update the city's development standards for ADUs and JADUs to be in conformance with state statutes and utilize the available regulatory options to maintain neighborhood quality within the city. It is recommended that the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council the approval of Z-S-2023-0003 to amend portions of Title IX of the Simi Valley Municipal Code pertaining to the regulation of accessory dwelling units. Thank you, and staff is available for questions.
Wonderful. Commissioners, we have any questions for staff?
Yes.
Commissioner Mayor, you want to go first?
Yes. So what is the reason behind SB9 and ADUs, to the best of your ability to answer that question?
My understanding is that California is having quite an acute housing shortage. The ADU ordinance was passed to basically provide what is called the middle housing that is missing, basically the smaller units for couples, single people, that kind of thing. So that's why you get the sizes. I'm not really sure about SB9, though I believe that's a similar aim for that state law. And basically to allow ministerial lot splits as well to facilitate the provision of that kind of housing. I'm not sure if Sean wants to add anything to that.
Thank you.
I was just going to add that the underlying purpose and policy, I believe, is to increase housing stock in the state of California.
Can an ADU qualify for becoming an SB9 unit down the line?
It could be converted to an SB9 unit. As long as the homeowner is willing to, I'm not sure if the size requirements play a role because I'm not really that familiar with SB9. However, they would also need to spend money in order to get separate meters, separate connections for gas, water, and electricity because ADUs are accessory structures, and as such, water, electricity, and gas have to be taken off the main home. An SB9 unit is a completely separate unit, and as such has to take the utilities and services separately.
Thank you.
I think the SB9 size limits would apply, but I'm not sure how much overlap there is between ADUs and SB9s in that aspect.
Is there a maximum size to ADUs?
Yes, 1,200 square feet, as long as your lot is over 8,000 square feet. If if a lot is 8,000 or less, the maximum is 1,000 square feet.
If someone was to build a barn, I asked you that question before, can it be converted to an ADU?
Yes, under current state law, existing legally permitted structures can be converted to accessory dwelling units without requiring further setbacks.
Even in the future, like not in existing, but like I build a barn right now and then in the future I want to convert it to become an ADU. Thank you. How does, if in any way, an ADU become a low-income ADU?
If it is in a medium or low-income census tract, then it gets counted towards RENA numbers. It gets counted towards RENA numbers. And I believe we had 37 built last year that counted towards RENA numbers.
And is there any way that HOAs can further restrict ADUs?
Under civil code, HOAs cannot impose unreasonable restrictions on constructing an ADU. As to what constitutes unreasonable, I think that's open to interpretation. So under state code, they cannot prevent you from building an ADU. They can impose certain design restrictions, and whether those design restrictions qualify as unreasonable is
So, I
beyond
mean,
our scope.
like if I were to build an ADU, I live in an HOA, so if I were to build an ADU in my front yard, there's no front yard setback that my HOA could impose on me. If it's up to 800 square
Under
feet.
state law and under development code, they cannot. There's no.
The HOA would have to comply with state law. They would be preempted.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. That's all for now.
Thank you very much. Vice Chair Rice?
Mr. Gunasekera, really quickly, you mentioned the Hillside Performance Standards, and it's on page 7 of the packet. And it also says that the Hillside, in our municipal code, that's an open space development standard which is not enforceable for statewide exempt ADUs up to 800 square feet. I'm kind of confused by that. I don't really understand that paragraph.
Sure. So under HPS, under the Hillside Performance Standards, you cannot build in areas that are 20% or more slopes.
Correct.
Technically, that is an open space limitation.
Correct.
Because that's the purpose of it, to maintain that open space. Open space is specifically mentioned as a development standard that we cannot impose on statewide exemption ADUs. So if somebody were to come in and say they have a portion of their lot that is 20% or more slopes, if they want to build a gazebo or something on there,
Right.
the city's development code requirements kick in and they cannot build it there.
Correct.
However, state law says you cannot impose that restriction up to 800 square feet
On
for an ADU. So we would need to let them build that
Okay,
ADU.
so they can't build anything except for an ADU.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. All right. That's
As
what
long
I
as
thought
it's-
it
as
said,
long as
but it
it's-
didn't make
Yeah,
sense to me.
as long as it's
Okay.
limited to 800 square feet.
Thank you.
I hate to do this, but I just want to clarify one point. There is some litigation, though, pending out there, if I'm not mistaken, related to whether or not HOAs will be able to, whether or not state law will trump HOA bylaws. So there is a little bit of a caveat there.
Any other questions? Okay. All right, now we're going to open the public testimony portion of the hearing. Is there anyone in the chamber wishing to be heard on this matter? Okay. If there's not, we will close the public hearing portion. And we will move forward with comments and questions, discussion on this matter from the Planning Commission. You want to go first?
Yeah, I can go first. I have a hard time understanding the need in Simi Valley for, not the need for ADUs. I absolutely understand why somebody would want an ADU as an addition to their house or as for their elderly parents or growing kids or whatever as a rental to support their income. I have a hard time understanding because this kind of connected with SB9, and I understand we're not voting on that today, but I have a hard time understanding the need for all of this housing, additional separating lots in Simi Valley. Right now we have I have it written down somewhere, from 2021 census, we have 2.87 people per household. And I just don't understand, I don't see how this fits into Simi Valley. My problem with that is not that it's California is changing, everything is changing, all of the changes are bad. I don't have problems with people coming to live in Simi Valley. I came to live in Simi Valley. I just have a problem understanding who is this going to cater to. If it's low income housing and if it's creating more housing, affordable housing, I don't see how that's gonna happen. I don't see market correcting itself, because if we build more housing, we're going to have more people. California has beautiful weather. We have beaches. We have mountains. We have everything here. We're very lucky and blessed to live here. I don't see how market's going to correct itself. I don't see how that's ever going to be more affordable. To my point, I know, and I'm going to let everybody else talk as well. If from my understanding, you can live in your ADU that is 800 square feet, and you can have your primary residence and then 2 SB9 units in the back, and you can rent all 3 of them. And after 3 years, you can sell all of them and move to a different state or anywhere else. And I don't see how that's gonna solve any housing crisis, in my opinion, but I'm open to hear what you guys want to say.
Well, ultimately, staff has done what they've had to do, which is follow the state law as far as I see it. And it looks like you've done a really good job. You've even color-coded it, which I really appreciated. That was very nice. Thank you. That's a new one. I like that. It made it a lot easier to follow along. I agree with Commissioner Mayer there, with a lot of what she said. But ultimately, there's not much we can do about that, because that's not really why we're here. I mean, and there's some problems I have too. I mean, especially with ADUs, because whether they go to low-income people or not really doesn't matter, because these ADUs ultimately count towards moderate income when it comes to our RHNA goals anyway. They don't count towards lower income, even if lower income people move into them. So it is what it is. But we have to follow the state law. I mean, that's what we have to do, and that's why we're here. So this helps us get there. It helps us stick to our design guidelines, which is what we're trying to do, I think. And I appreciate that staff has tried to include as many setbacks and how to stick to the design guidelines that we've imposed in the past as much as possible. And so I like what staff has done, and I agree that there's a few things in here that I think are ludicrous. But that being said, there's not much I can do. So we have to do what we have to do. So we can't really fight Sacramento, I don't think. So I'm in favor of pushing this forward. So
Thank you very much. I'm in consensus with the two of you in that the rules placed before us are as we have them, and I think that the staff has done some excellent work into making the regulations play within the game, the rules that we've been placed before us. I think the city development standards and the objective design standards are fantastic. Again, within the standards that the state requires us to do it. I think supply and demand is going to play its part. It's going to play its part in other parts of the state that I think more so than Simi Valley. And so I think we'll be okay. So again, as stated, is that these are the rules we've been played to play by, and short of litigation, which may happen or which may not happen, I think we need to move forward this and worry about something else. So, may I have a reading of the resolution?
Resolution number SVPC 04-2023. A resolution of the Planning Commission of the approval of Development Code Amendment number Z-S-2023-0003 pertaining to accessory dwelling units, and a determination that the amendments are exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act.
The chair will now entertain a motion.
I move to adopt a resolution recommending approval of Z-S-2023-0003 and determining that the amendments are exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act.
A motion was made by Vice Chair Rice. May I have a second? I'll second it. Fantastic. Call for the vote. The motion passes. There is no appeal period for the zoning text amendment. The item will proceed to the City Council with the Planning Commission's recommendation. Okay. This is the time and place set for a public hearing on the consideration of Z-S-2023-002 to amend portions of the Title IX to modify standards and regulations for the allowance of cargo containers as residential accessory storage, and a determination that the amendments are exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. Are there any ex parte communications to report? No. May we have an oral report on this matter by staff?
Yes, Chairman Tolson, members of the Planning Commission. This is a city-initiated zoning text amendment brought to you at the request of the City Council regarding a permanent placement of cargo containers for residential accessory storage on single-family properties. Our Assistant Planner, Zarui Chaparian, has a presentation tonight.
Good evening, honorable commissioners. Tonight's staff will be providing proposed code amendments to allow cargo containers as incidental accessory storage to residential uses. Staff is requesting consideration of the amendments and for the Planning Commission to make a recommendation to the City Council on whether to revise portions of Title IX to allow the use of cargo containers as incidental storage for residential uses. On August 22nd last year, City Council directed staff to prepare a code amendment that would allow cargo containers as permanent storage to residential uses. Staff presented the code amendment to all 4 neighborhood councils as well in March of 2023. The outcome of these meetings are provided in your supplemental staff report and will be discussed tonight. Currently, cargo containers are not allowed as permanent accessory storage to residential uses on residential lots in the city. The city issues a temporary use permit to allow one 8-foot by 16-foot cargo container on a residential lot for up to 28 days, as pictured on screen, for the purposes of moving goods and/or temporary storage. A cargo container is also allowed on a residential lot when there is a valid and active building permit for the residential property. Cargo containers are allowed on residentially zoned properties when the primary use is a non-residential use, for storage or incidental uses to the primary approved land use. This includes properties with religious facilities, schools, and hospitals. Upon researching cargo containers for storage purposes, staff determined several advantages and disadvantages to cargo containers. The advantages include that cargo containers are easy to obtain and install. Also, as they are pre-assembled units or require little to no assembly and neither building materials nor labor will be required, cargo containers are less costly than traditional construction. Lastly, they can be upcycled. As for disadvantages of cargo containers, safety is a concern with regard to hazardous materials used in or on a container if it was used for marine activities in its previous life. Neighborhood council members are also expressed concerns about the containers being airtight and having heavy doors that could potentially trap persons. A cargo container on a residential lot is difficult to screen. A typical container is between 8 to 10 feet in height and would not properly be screened from public view, with current code only allowing a maximum of 6-foot-high perimeter walls and fences in most residential zones. Aesthetics is another disadvantage of containers, as they are simply just boxes and would not match residential architecture. Lastly, enforcement is an issue. the placement of anything on private property not viewable from the public right-of-way presents enforcement challenges as alleged violations may not be able to be substantiated and therefore no enforcement action can be taken. Staff surveyed 18 other jurisdictions in and outside of the county and considered City Council's input on coming up with standards for the code amendment. For instance, City Council recommends allowing cargo containers as storage on parcels at least 11,000 square feet in size. As there are more residential lots that are at least 10,000 square feet versus 11,000 square feet in the city, staff finds that more residents will be able to take advantage of a code amendment that would allow cargo containers on lots at least 10,000 square feet in size. Staff initially recommended an amendment to allow one container up to 320 square feet in size. Upon meeting with neighborhood councils, staff modified the proposed amendment to allow one cargo container up to 160 square feet in size on lots at least 10,000 square feet, or on properties with an animal, limited animal, or horse overlay. Standard cargo containers are between 8 to 10 feet tall. Staff recommends limiting cargo containers to a height of 10 feet and not allowing stacking due to screening concerns. To screen cargo containers, staff recommends a 6-foot tall perimeter wall and initially recommended a 5-foot setback from side yard property lines. Upon meeting with neighborhood councils, staff modified the amendment to require a setback of 10 feet from rear and all side property lines. These standards were adjusted after meeting with neighborhood council members who expressed concerns about screening from public and neighbors' views. Landscape buffers will not be required. Given the potential high cost of converting a cargo container to match a primary residence, staff recommends that cargo containers be painted with one solid color found on the primary residence to maintain some level of architectural compatibility. Lastly, staff would require a minor zoning clearance to entitle the cargo containers as storage units on residentially zoned parcels. Each neighborhood council heard the proposed amendment in March. As stated previously, neighborhood councils 2, 3, and 4 recommended denial of the proposed amendment. Neighborhood Council 1 recommended approval with modifications to the code amendment proposed. The modifications are provided in the supplemental staff report attached to your staff report. All neighborhood councils cited concerns with regards to containers' environmental and physical safety, stating that certain containers may have previously housed hazardous materials in their previous life cycle. Also, neighborhood council members voiced their concerns that units may not be properly outfitted with safe locking or unlocking mechanisms and may lack proper ventilation without modifications, thus making it a safety hazard to persons entering the container. Since the units are not treated as structures, building permits would not be required and would not be inspected for health and safety purposes. Staff has not been able to determine if an environmental certification or test is available for cargo containers. However, verification by staff that the container is certified and that the certification matches the unit placed on the property would not be practical due to the expense, lack of staff time, and expertise. Other concerns were the proposed lot size. Neighborhood councils found that the proposed lot size is too small for the proposed use and the allowable maximum size of the container was too large. Setbacks were also a concern as they found them not to be deep enough as proposed and that containers would not be screened from public view. Subsequent to meeting with neighborhood council members, staff recommended the following modifications to the proposed code amendments. Modify the maximum allowable size of containers to up to 160 square feet instead of up to 320 square feet. Increase rear and side yard setbacks to 10 feet from the property lines. It still would not be allowed in the front yard setback area. Remove requirements for landscape buffers and only require 6-foot tall solid perimeter walls. In addition, based on neighborhood council discussion, staff requests Planning Commission's recommendation to update the code amendment to allow cargo containers on lots of 20,000 square feet or 1 acre. Here on screen is a diagram to give you an idea of what the setbacks could look like. Note that this diagram is not to scale. This shows the container in the rear yard with a minimum setback requirement and screening on all sides. This is a diagram of a container in the side yard with proper screening and setbacks. On screen is a three-dimensional model to scale of a cargo container in a rear yard, setback 10 feet from rear and side yard property lines, and a 6-foot tall perimeter wall. The top of the container is visible from the street. Here's another three-dimensional view of the top of the cargo container from street view. And here are examples of cargo containers that would not be acceptable under the new code. The first image is that of a container in the front yard without proper screening. And the second container would need to be painted a solid color and provide screening. It is recommended that the Planning Commission consider the proposed amendments and make a recommendation whether to amend portions of the code per Z-S-2023-0002 and a determination that the amendments are exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. This concludes staff's presentation, and we are available for questions.
Thank you very much. Fantastic presentation. Do we have questions for staff from the commissioners?
Yes, but if he wants to start first, that's
Vice Chair Rice, you going to go first?
I just had one question, and I thought I wrote it down, and maybe, weren't they supposed to be on concrete too? Or did I read that wrong? I thought I wrote that down, but,
They do not need to be on concrete, no.
okay. All right.
We initially informed neighborhood councils 1 and 2 that they should be on concrete if over 120 square feet, but upon conferring with building and safety officials, because it's not treated as a structure, they will not issue building permits, so they wouldn't require a foundation.
So if they're not on concrete, would they have to be on, say, gravel or something like that, though? Or would they be placed on dirt or something?
On dirt, it would depend on what the homeowner prefers to place it on, but
Okay,
it
so
would
the homeowner could put it on anything, is what you're saying?
technically level.
Okay.
The Planning Commission can make appropriate suggestions if that's a factor.
Any other questions, Vice Chair? Commissioner Mayor?
Thank you. Do we have any idea how big the demand is for this?
At this time, we do not have an idea of how big the demand is for this.
You mentioned that there's no possible toxic material study, but that is also the staff's concern. So what is the possibility of addressing that? Because it was a concern for all the neighborhood councils.
There are ways to, what we found is that there are ways that cargo containers can be modified to remove toxicity, such as sandblasting, but again, that, that would emit particles. That's one option, and repainting it, and then also encapsulating by painting over what the cargo containers already have on them. Those are some options.
And when comparing to other cities that that already have adopted this, and I saw that Santa Paula, I think, has the most similar of what we're being proposed here. What is their experience?
Santa Paula does not issue zoning clearances or building permits for anything under 120 square feet. They were not able to provide too much information, except that they would require cargo containers to look like the main residence.
Thank you.
Can we go to the slide where it shows the two pictures of the two photographs of the two containers, please? Perfect. Am I wrong in thinking that both of those would not be permitted because of the less than 10 feet setback?
That's correct.
Okay. That wasn't meant, you mentioned other things why it wouldn't be approved, but I think that's even more so the case. Okay, that was it for me. We will open the public testimony portion of the hearing. Is there anyone in the chamber wishing to be heard on this matter? Okay. If there's no questions. We'll close the public testimony portion of the hearing. Are there any comments or questions from members of the Planning Commission?
Can I ask staff another question?
You bet.
Do we have I just did a quick search on shipping containers, and I have a height on shipping containers of 8 foot 6 inches. Is there like an average height of shipping containers? Because that's what I came up with, and
They range between 8 to 10 feet.
okay. The reason why I'm asking is because, like, if we decided to do this, we can also limit the height of the shipping container too, of course. And so, I don't know what, like, are 20-foot ones usually 10 foot tall, and 10-foot ones are normally 8 foot 6 inches tall. I mean, like, I don't know. So I've never purchased a shipping container. So, I mean, I've been in a shipping container. But I've even painted a shipping container before, but I've never measured one before. So we don't know. We have to kind of guess at that, right?
We can definitely update the code to limit the height to 8.5 feet. I think it goes only down to 8.5 feet from our research.
Okay, so
Yeah,
so
from the
that
outside.
that's probably the low end of the height of a shipping container, generally speaking, probably. Okay. I
Correct.
don't know. So okay.
And
Sean, I just want to add one thing. Whatever you referred to on the internet, you're probably going to have to identify, and we'll make that part of the record.
Okay. Fair enough.
I have one more question.
Sure.
Vice Chair Mayor or
Thank you.
Commissioner Mayor?
What is the benefit to shipping containers versus a shed? Because it's not, I mean, it is costly to buy a shipping container, right? It's not?
It's cheaper than getting a shed, or cheaper than a tough shed.
And in many cases, what we're talking about here is also a rental versus a permanent structure. So if you're doing construction or if you're doing a move out, it's a temporary situation, not
think-
necessarily long term.
I think that was defined before. If you have a temporary use permit up to 28 days, and then is this for temporary use, or it could be for permanent use?
It's for permanent
Okay.
storage.
So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Sorry.
No, but what I'm trying to understand the benefit for a homeowner, but I mean, it is their property, so that's where I stand. Like, everybody has, within reason, rights to do whatever they want. on their property.
Perfect.
I would prefer for them to have the concrete pad under. It's still, I mean, I don't know if I can say it, but it is ugly, in my opinion. But, I mean, my ugly and somebody else's ugly, I guess, can be two different things.
Well, I'd like for it to at least be screened or hidden away, and I'd like for it not to be 12 feet tall and
Yeah.
bright orange or something, and I mean, okay. So let me just go here. So if the last slide we had some suggestions that came from the neighborhood council, and one of those was a 20,000 square foot lot or even an acre lot. Okay, now we're getting into something that I could work with, I
Yeah,
think, because
I agree.
if we had a big lot like that and somebody had it in the back of their lot because maybe they had a bunch of horses or something like that, and I don't know what you would store in there because I don't have horses, but something like that I could see that, or
I
you
agree with
had equipment or something like that, and you painted it so that it matched your house, or some other things you kept back there, and I could understand that. That makes a lot of sense to me. Keeping it in a normal residential neighborhood, I really don't understand that. I think all you would do is just upset the heck out of your neighbors. Keeping it in a homeowners association, I think, they'd string you up. I mean, I don't know how else to put that. And they'd probably kick you out. And the other problem is that in a residential neighborhood, it creates, well, in any neighborhood, as staff has correctly pointed out, it is just really hard to enforce this. So once we let any of this happen, it becomes very, very difficult for staff to enforce it. So if we allow this, I think the only way we allow it is on a very big lot where it maybe needs to be painted. It needs to be a big lot. It needs to be painted. It needs to be camouflaged. And there needs to be some sort of, there needs to be these 10-foot setbacks. So at least when it goes in, it's painted and it's camouflaged and people don't see it, but the person who spent the money to buy this container, probably a used container that's going to sit there for a very long period of time, they get the use out of it, but it makes sense, because it's cheaper than buying a giant shed and I don't know. That's where I'm at. But I can't see this in a residential neighborhood. I just don't understand how that would make any sense. So anyway.
Anything
No, no,
else?
and I agree. I mean, instead of a pool, you would look at somebody's container. I agree.
What's our thoughts on the height? Do we want to?
I personally, maybe 9 feet. Is that reasonable? I mean, you have 9 feet in the as your example. So does that seem reasonable since that's in the
I think what we do is
as
we're
a maximum
discussing-
height
Yeah, I think this is a discussion for us.
for us? Since that's in the presentation.
Right.
As a maximum height. And since we also have in the presentation that Neighborhood Council came up with as a minimum of 20,000 square feet as a property, I think that should be the minimum. And they said 20,000 to an acre. So, 20,000 is a little less than, was that a little less than half an acre? Is that right?
Yeah.
A little less than half an acre.
Yeah, let me just clarify that the 20,001 acre were suggestions that staff is presenting to you based on neighborhood council input.
Correct. And I agree with that. I maybe even nudge that up a little bit, and I'm okay with that as well.
What's our thoughts on the concrete pad?
I don't know the answer to that. If we're worried about hazardous chemicals, then the answer would be yes. If that's our concern, then the answer would be yes, because I know if you have a motorhome, it needs to sit on concrete.
Yeah.
And that's what we have for RVs. So
Okay. So based upon what we're discussing, we're contemplating doing a 9-foot height limit, a concrete pad, lot size of at least 20,000 square feet. And then we talked about setbacks and keeping it painted to the look of the
yes,
house.
with you said 10-foot setbacks.
Yeah.
Painted to match the house or primary structure,
Yeah.
and did we? And that would be a minor zoning clearance. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're still at a zoning clearance level.
A minor zoning clearance. Is that
Yep.
correct? Okay.
I think this kind of takes into the considerations what the neighborhood councils were
I hope so.
addressing.
I hope so, because they were pretty adamant, and
Well, they wanted it denied.
Right.
yeah,
Right.
I think we're listening to them.
Correct. Correct. The one,
Sorry, the other one was one the commissioners mentioned, should it be in an animal overlay district only or any size lot over 20,000 square feet? Any location over 20?
I think any size.
Annie,
I think yeah, because there's still lots that are over 20, but if you're in an HOA, you're not going to be able to do this anyway. So,
I hope so, because it's normally
well,
not.
you can't
written-
do it. What HOA is going to let you do this?
But if it's not written in the CCNRs and the handbook, you can do it. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know, maybe that's
Okay.
maybe a question for the city attorney, but if it's not written in the CCNRs,
Yeah.
there's no way for HOA can deny it, but then it becomes a litigation possibly.
Okay. Well,
so based upon what we were been presented,
Yeah.
based upon what the neighborhood councils
Yeah.
suggested, I think we've addressed the issues that can be moved forward to the city council, and we can have a reading of it and then move forward.
Well, we're sending it forward to the city council. I think that we can send it to them and they can.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You'll be making recommendations.
yes.
That's it. Okay. So we're going to have a reading of the resolution. Any other comments before we move forward? So we're going to have a reading of the resolution, and we're going to need to have someone say, as amended, with the conditions that we've put forward here, which is the 9-foot, the concrete slab, the lot size at 20,000 square feet, painted to the same color as the primary structure, with setbacks at 10 feet, side and back. So, may I please have a reading of the resolution?
Resolution number SVPC 05-2023. A resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of the Simi Valley to consider city-initiated text amendments Z-S-2023-0002 to revise portions of Title IX of Simi Valley Municipal Code to allow the use of cargo containers as residential accessory storage, and a determination that the amendments are exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act.
Thank you very much. The chair will now entertain a motion. So, with the words as amended.
As amended.
Well,
Okay.
now that's the reading of the resolution, and so now the chair can entertain a motion. It can be a motion either to recommend approval, or it can be a motion not to recommend approval of the proposed amendments and so forth. So you have options.
Okay,
Now you're just waiting for a motion.
you're right. Are we,
I move to adopt or approve a resolution?
Adopt a resolution?
Adopt a resolution recommending approval of Z-S-2023-0002 and it's as amended in its with a concrete pad, a minor zoning clearance, a height of 9 feet, 20 on a lot size of at least 20,000 square feet, one container, 10-foot side and
back?
back setback, painted the color of the primary structure, and a determination that the amendments are exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act.
I'll second it.
Thank you very much. We have a motion was made by Vice Chair Rice and a second by Commissioner Mayer. Let's call for the vote. The motion passes. There is no appeal period for the zoning text amendments, and the items will proceed to the City Council with the Planning Commission's recommendation. Our next item on the agenda is under Other, and this is a discussion and request for direction on residential design.
Yes, Chairman Tolson and members of the Planning Commission. Tonight is a discussion item to get initial input on potentially proposed changes in policy and/or code amendments regarding metal buildings, residential accessory structures, including size restrictions and general aesthetic designs. Our associate planner, Alex Klingman, will begin with a presentation, then we'll open it up for an open discussion between the Planning Commission and staff.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. Tonight we will be discussing metal building design options and current residential accessory structure policies. The community has expressed concern over current city policies that restrict metal accessory structures such as garages, carports, and tool sheds on residential lots. On August 22nd, City Council directed staff to review these standards with Planning Commission. With the results of this discussion item, staff would proceed with any necessary policy or code updates and associated public hearings. To provide some context, metal materials used to construct accessory structures have become increasingly popular over the years as they tend to be more affordable than traditional structures made of wood or timber. Many prefabricated metal structures or kits are available for purchase in various colors and sizes, making them a cost-effective choice for homeowners. In the mid-2000s, the city enacted policies for residential accessory structures, which have been administratively updated from time to time. Staff currently implements the following policies to ensure that new residential accessory structures remain subordinate to the primary dwelling, are consistent with the residential design guidelines, and are used for their intended purpose. Accessory detached structures larger than 120 square feet are required to be architecturally compatible with the main house through the use of matching colors, materials, and roof slope. These structures are also limited in size to a maximum of 30% of the main structure or 1,200 square feet, whichever is less. No more than 40% of a required yard setback can be covered by any accessory structures. And lastly, in animal overlay zones, accessory structures used to house farm animals like barns and stables are allowed to be constructed of metal and are limited to 2,000 square feet in size. These standards were provided to you as Attachment A of the report. The purpose of this discussion tonight is to explore metal building design options, size restrictions, and related design standards. The Planning Commission is requested to review the following 5 discussion items and provide feedback where necessary. Staff will receive this feedback and come back with potential policy updates or codified objective design standards at a later time. Discussion item 1 is whether to allow metal building design options for accessory structures such as garages, carports, and sheds. To reiterate, the city's current policy limits the use of metal materials to barns or stables. If metal buildings are allowed, staff would continue to encourage architectural compatibility with the primary home through the use of colors, materials, and roof slope to match. A policy update would ensure consistency with the residential design guidelines and respond to community requests. If staff is directed to proceed with policy updates, discussion item 2 is an example of potential design guidelines for metal buildings. A, metal accessory structures 120 square feet or less in size must be painted a minimum of 1 primary color from the main home. B, metal accessory structures larger than 120 square feet must incorporate 1 primary paint color and 1 material such as clad with stucco or wood siding from the main home. The roof of detached metal accessory structures of any size must match the color of the primary home and include a roof pitch of no less than 3 to 12 with overhangs or eaves. Quonset hut type metal buildings, like those without a roof pitch or roof overhangs, and the one shown here on the slide, are not acceptable. The Commission may choose to provide comments on these proposed design guidelines for any potential revisions to the policy. Discussion item 3 is whether to allow metal structures in residential non-animal overlay zones. The city's current policy limits the use of metal structures to properties within animal overlay zones. And if directed, this policy update would expand the allowance of these structures across residential lots, regardless of this overlay. Discussion item 4 is whether to codify size limits on accessory structures in general. To ensure that accessory structures remain subordinate to the main home, the current policy limits them to a maximum of 30% of the main structure, or 1,200 square feet, whichever is less. The current issue with this policy is that it does not specifically define the main residential structure, and staff has implemented this by referring to 30% as the habitable square footage of the main home, excluding any garages and patios. Another issue is that the main structure calculation also includes the second floor area of 2-story buildings, making the 30% ratio inconsistent with the existing yard area. One way to remedy this is to limit the 30% calculation to the first-story habitable area. Staff requests direction on whether to codify this requirement or continue to implement it as a policy. Staff has also received various community requests to exceed the size allowance for accessory structures on larger lots. Discussion item 5 is to consider the option of allowing these structures to exceed the 30% or 1,200 square foot size limit with a conditional use permit at the director's discretion if certain findings are met. Current policy is consistent with the size restrictions for new ADUs, accessory dwelling units, and SB9 units, which are limited to 1,200 square feet on lots over 8,000 square feet. It is also important to note that state ADU law allows the conversion of existing accessory structures regardless of size. For example, an existing 3,000 square foot garage converted to an ADU would not be subject to local unit size requirements. Staff has also researched surrounding cities for their regulations on metal accessory structures and found that while most jurisdictions do allow these metal buildings, they are required to incorporate the same design materials and colors of the primary dwellings. Staff requests that the Planning Commission review and discuss the items presented this evening and direct staff to move forward with a policy update and/or zoning code amendment, or provide an alternative recommendation. This concludes our presentation, and staff is available for any questions.
Anybody have questions before we start going through the 5 items of staff?
Yeah, what is considered a larger lot? You said a larger lot, so. In your presentation, you said a larger lot under 5. So what is considered to be a larger lot?
Current policy. Where did you?
You said it.
I think that's on question number 5 or item number 5.
Yeah.
Typically on, for example, an estate lot, we have, projects where sometimes people want to do accessory structures like an RV garage or just a garage in general, larger than what we allow with our policy.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Typically lots over 8,000 square feet, maybe.
The questions I have is, are there restrictions on electrical in these units or plumbing in any of these structures?
You can have electrical running through accessory structures, of course, with your electrical permit. Plumbing is also, I believe, allowed with your permit, but we allow maybe like a sink in a bathroom, but it's restricted when it comes to kitchens.
So there's some guidelines in terms of how much you can have, or?
You can't provide a kitchen in it, but you can do a bathroom and you can do a sink, provided the floor plan shows that it's remaining accessory. It's not a habitable type structure.
And I'll clarify that, Chairman Tolson. Traditionally, we've eliminated the requirement for guest houses, so it can't trigger a full bathroom kitchen setup. But there's a lot of people with garages where over the years we have issued small sink and restroom type permits because you want a bathroom out in the yard, something to that effect. But it's not a full-blown guest house situation. So occasionally that does come up. But
Okay. Fantastic. So now, one more question.
To connect to yours. I think it was mentioned that this has a path to become an ADU. So that would entail that a full kitchen can be added in the future.
Correct. If it meets the requirements of an ADU and they want to convert it later, and if it's a permitted accessory structure, they could potentially do that.
Thank you.
Sorry, since ADUs are my wheelhouse, let me just answer that a bit. You'd need to make certain modifications to that structure, including, so essentially a shed is a non-habitable structure, as is a bathroom when you add it to a shed, as far as building and safety is concerned. You need to add things like a moisture barrier. You need to meet building permit requirements for insulation, things like that, to convert it to an ADU.
Thank you. I was just wondering because it has a path to become an ADU. So.
Great question. So if we could do me a favor and put us up to item number 1 on the discussion item so we can tackle these one at a time. So our discussion item number 1, there we go. Do we want to allow metal designs for these structures?
I mean, we just allowed the shipping containers.
We sure did.
Well, there already are these in the city. I don't.
Yeah.
Correct. So the answer is yes.
Yes.
Okay, item number 2.
So let me clarify that we do not permit metal garages, and the 2 on the left,
Okay.
central and left, even in animal overlay districts. So there may be some existing non-conforming
Okay,
ones from way
right.
back. so-
Existing non-conforming because they're so old, right?
Right. And I think the original intent of not allowing them for the past 15 or 20 years
Right.
is more aesthetic purposes in some of the
Correct.
non-overlay neighborhoods. So I just want to point that out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, so discussion item number 2. Okay, we're talking about design guidelines as it relates to paint. We want to have it match the primary structure.
Match the primary.
That's our suggestion. Over 120 square feet, again, matching
Margin must match the colors.
and having one primary color and another material for structures over 120 square feet.
So roof must match the color of the primary.
So we're on B right now. 2B. We're just giving suggestions on matching the primary home. And wood siding and stucco, I don't think is significant about requiring it.
So the color would just match,
Correct,
right? Yeah,
correct.
So,
We,
just for design guidelines
Yep.
purposes. Okay.
we okay with that?
I agree with that.
We're taking notes, I guess, I hope. Because we're not doing a motion at the end here. C, the roof of the detached must match the color of the primary home roof. That I think is a challenge.
Yeah, I don't.
If it doesn't match the material, if it's not a requirement to match the material, I mean,
Correct. I think that, I
That's
don't
gonna be-
think we're matching the material.
I don't
I
know
don't
how
think
you're
we
gonna do
match the
that.
color, right?
How are you going to do that?
That's my point. So that's our opinion here. If it's not less than the certain size pitch,
I
is that
I do have a question, additional
yeah.
question. In regards to the roof, would you be able to add, to put solar panels on it with permits and everything?
Do you need a permit
Well-
for it?
Well, yeah, I guess, but I think. you need
Solar
it.
panels would require a building permit. There may be some load calculations for some of these metal buildings that have to be calculated out. So these would become accessory structures, so potentially, and I'm looking at our principal planner, if you agree that they could be allowed on these accessory structures.
I believe they could be allowed to the structures, but again, like you, Mr. Gibson mentioned, is that it will have to be brought up to the structural level so it could support the weight. It transfers all the way down to the base of it as well. So it wouldn't be like an easy just put it on type of thing.
So, I mean, it would have to have a certain kind of roof to be able to support that.
In order to put solar panels, not only you have to have a slope, but you also have to look at the azimuth. So it may not even be enough area to make it worth it, and it may not be the right azimuth to be on it. So most likely, in something small like that, I'd be surprised if anybody wanted to go through the expenditure of putting solar panels on them,
But
unless
if
it's
1,200
added on
square
to
feet,
whatever.
then it is. I mean, 1,200 square feet is somebody's
Yeah,
house.
but if you have a slope roof, only half of it is going to probably be acceptable. So, I mean, it depends, But again, it's many things that you have to consider.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for bringing that up. Let's go back to that page for the screen for us on the TV. Okay, so we've got the, how about roof overhangs? Any discussion on how much a roof overhang can be? Are we looking at how wide it is or what?
Well, the example just shows a minimum overhang, and maybe the bigger question is a more traditional roof versus a Quonset hut type roof. If you still want to have that distinction from our existing standards to maintain that option, so it's more of a roof with overhangs of some minimum overhang, or a Quonset hut which doesn't have any sort of eave.
Any thoughts on Quonset huts, folks? Yeah. We're, no comment.
Nope.
Beautiful. We're on discussion item number 3.
Before we move on, can I clarify?
Sure.
So, for B, are you okay with the wood siding and the clad? Do you want one material to match or just strictly one paint if it's over 120 square feet?
My thought's just the color.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I mean, if it's in somebody's backyard, you know, and I don't know. I don't know about this. I think we're starting to get into, we're opening up a can of worms here, and
They're just looking for our opinions.
I know, and I don't know. Somebody's going to paint their shed, and you know they're going to paint their shed because they want to paint their shed a color, and they think it's going to work with their backyard and everything else. And it may not be exactly the color of their house. And I don't think the city's going to come and raid their house because their shed doesn't match their house or anything like that. I mean, we're looking for a design guideline and everything else, and I get that, and I think that's great.
I think the question she's asking is the material that the sides are to, if the house is stucco, does it need to be stucco? If the house is a
Well, if
wood
it's a
siding,
metal structure, why would you put stucco on a metal structure?
That's what they're suggesting that it have to be.
I disagree with that.
Yeah,
because
I agree.
if
Yeah,
you-
no, absolutely
If you
not.
bought a prefab structure, it's not going to match your primary
Correct.
residence.
No.
You're not
Correct.
going to put stucco on
Correct.
it.
No, who's going to?
Understand?
Yeah,
Right.
no.
Beautiful.
If that's the question, no.
Yeah.
Okay. And for C, are you agreeing with the fact that they need overhangs and eaves, or are you okay with accessory structures not providing that? So more like Quonset type, I think I have
I
some
guess it boils
examples.
down to how big these structures are, because if it's somebody's shed, I mean, we're not going to regulate somebody's shed.
Those are 3 different Quonset hut style roofs. I think they're fine,
That's not acceptable.
unless we have other opinions.
Yeah,
We're matching the color of the house.
yeah.
If it's something big, then, like something like these are gigantic. So maybe something like this maybe should match the house. But I mean, something in somebody's backyard, I don't want to go down that road.
These are in backyards.
But
I understand what
you know what I'm saying? I don't want to be the color police that's gonna,
And if I,
We're not
if I
talking
don't like
not
my
only
neighbor-
color, but we're talking materials too, right?
we are. Okay, but
So here we're talking roof pitch.
Could
I
you
mean, the barn,
consider-
okay, the one in the middle is a barn. Okay, that's not a Quonset hut, that's a barn. But nevertheless, I mean,
Could you consider size restrictions for structures like this?
There we go.
should we?
I think that's
Maybe based on the size of but that goes back to the size of the property,
That's,
right? I mean, there you
That's
go.
number 4.
That's number 4, but we're not on number 4. We're on
Yeah.
number 3. So we're on Quonset huts. Okay, so
Can I just combine 3 and 4 for a second? And
Sure.
Okay,
if
sure,
we
let's
were
do that.
If we were to limit like some design standards for if it's super big, and then less
Yes.
restrictive if it's a regular size shed, like
yes,
that
yes.
would make more sense to me.
on 4, I agree with the city on this one, or on that earlier one, that we should just go with the first floor, and
Yeah.
definitely that should be the standard, is based on the first floor, not the total habitable size of the house.
So that we're on to 4 here. So number 4, we're going to go with the existing first story will be the guideline in terms of the size limit, not a second story additional number of square feet.
And
Makes
is that
sense.
something you want codified?
Please.
We can bring back to you. Okay.
Yeah. We're pretty straightforward on that one.
I think so.
Okay, let's go back to number 3 then.
I'm sorry. And to clarify for this item, this is regarding all accessory structures, not only metal
Correct.
accessory structures.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then 3 is right now only metal in animal overlay zones. We're thinking, is this going to be now allowed in residential? I say yes.
I say yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've done 3, done 4, now do 5. Can we exceed more than 30% with a CUP?
Let me just, before you guys respond to that, there's 2 items here: traditional accessory structures which are non-barns, 1,200 square feet or 30% is the cap. If it's a barn, we have a 2,000 square foot policy. In part because of the new ADU restrictions, and also to maintain the accessory nature of those barn sizes. We've been getting requests for barns well over 2,000 square feet used as garages. So there's kind of like the example here, that may be perhaps 2,500 square feet. Is that something we want to allow or allow that option with a conditional use permit to go over a 1,200 square foot limit to allow some amount of discretion?
So are you suggesting that maybe we allow a CUP up to 2,000 square feet? Is that what you're suggesting?
Any structure over 1,200 square feet, someone could apply for some sort of conditional use
up
permit.
to 2,000 square feet? Is that what you're?
Or even over 2,000 square feet could open up the barn.
Okay,
open up the barn
or are you
gates.
suggesting that that from 1,200 to 2,000 square feet, they could get a administrative conditional use permit, and anything above that, they'd have to come to the planning commission?
Absolutely, those are also options. We can do it a tiered system.
I think it goes back to the lot size again. I mean, when it comes to big structures like these.
So we have here the exceeding 30%.
Yeah.
What, is there a percentage we want to go with, or?
Well, I like that idea, because I think on something like that, because up to 2,000 square feet, I think can be handled administratively. Anything
bet.
bigger than that, we're talking a really, really big structure, and that's something that the whole planning commission, one, they got to really want it, because they have to bring it here.
Right.
And so it must be something they really, really want. So
Is that something you guys want to do?
I
Versus
have
that-
one more question.
yeah.
There is no limit in how many sheds or these structures you can have on your property?
That's correct. There's no set limit. There's separation requirements and overall lot coverage requirements, but you could have
So
multiple.
You can have
structures.
this and a shipping container and a little shed. And
That's correct.
And an ADU and a junior ADU.
I'm
Yes.
just
No, no.
asking.
we
What
can
I'm-
take you down the street and show you one. So.
What I may be hearing is potentially codify the 30% rule up to 1,200 square feet, then maybe an administrative permit from 12 to 2,000, maybe 2,000 and over could be planning commission level.
Perfect. I think
That's what I heard.
that's what, yeah. I think that says what we're thinking.
That would be my suggestion.
Okay. We've gone through all 5. Anything else? Any questions?
I think what maybe wasn't entirely clear is if we want to keep the style of the structure a policy versus the size of structures, because the objectively codifying what you could look at some of those Quonset huts, et cetera, what we think complies in our
Well-
guidelines and what is actually codified, there may be two different things that may be difficult to achieve and more rigid, whereas a policy gives the director the authority to interpret some of these items.
So does that add, like, which one adds more work to you as well? Not you.
Policies are more flexible, codes are more rigid. And when we get into colors and materials, I think we have some options, but I think we could bring that back when we actually bring the code amendments. So we'll get another crack at this, since it sounds like we're getting authority to do some of these code amendments to codify versus just policy everything. So we could look at those options.
Perfect. Thank you. Have we given you enough information? Okay.
I'm looking at my staff. Did we cover everything?
Just, I think the one last thing is in terms of the color and materials, somebody mentioned, maybe I think Commissioner Mayor mentioned at a certain size threshold that we should be more stringent in terms of colors and materials. What size threshold would that be? Maybe like over 750 square feet. We would need, if the house is stucco, then the accessory structure should be stucco.
Oh, I see what you're
Yeah,
saying.
because I think that was mentioned, but it
Oh,
kind of-
okay.
Yeah.
I see what you're
I
saying.
don't know what the exact size of.
So,
you can recommend the size.
So a typical two-car garage is usually 20 by 20, 400 square feet. RV garages, maybe 15 by 30 or 600 square feet as an example, just to give you some ballpark numbers.
I also think it's more of the height. Like if you had somebody right next door, it's more of a height that is going to be like impacting than the actual size. I mean, if you can see it from your yard constantly, probably has to be going with the height more so than the size. I mean, that's just my opinion.
The structure, the consistency of the side, what
Yeah.
the materials are made of. So we're concerned more with height.
Accessory structures are limited to 18 feet in height, and we would continue to implement that.
Yes, that's not, I mean, we're discussing right now if the design, like let's say stucco matching the primary residence is going to go with the size or the height. That is what we're discussing right now. Like, what is the threshold of the size of the height that once you reach, I don't know, 10 feet, let's say, I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there, that you have to over 10 feet match stucco with the primary residence and whatever the design is of the primary residence. It doesn't have to be 10 feet. I
think I've seen a lot of sheds are like 12 feet high, so maybe anything over 12 feet high.
Perfect.
that seems
Perfect.
reasonable.
Yes.
That seems reasonable, yeah.
And then minimum size-wise, maybe the 1,200 square feet? When you start having to add to the,
1,200 square feet would be kind of the cap. So maybe like 500 square feet,
Yeah,
anything over
yeah,
600
I
square
think,
feet.
yeah, more like 500 square feet. Yeah,
Okay.
1,200 is huge.
okay. 500? Seems,
That's a pretty big
Okay.
shed.
let's go 500. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Does the staff have anything to report?
No items tonight, Mr. Chair.
Do commissioners have anything to report? Mobile home mediation board, rent mediation board. Anything? Wait. Before
No
we go-
items tonight.
Planning Commission, I got one thing to say. We've got some members of the Leadership Simi Valley class here. Thank you for coming tonight. I think we have some on the online portion of our meeting too. Thank you for participating in leadership and coming tonight to learn what things we do. Nothing for mobile home rent mediation.
No items.
Tree Advisory Board.
No items, Mr. Chair.
This concludes the meeting of March 29th, 2023. The next scheduled meeting will be April 12th, 2023. This meeting is adjourned.